I think it's pretty clear that today's workforce is not the same workforce that it was even 3 to 5 years ago. And a lot of people are confused and trying to figure out, how do I actually succeed in this new world of work that we're all a part of? And I've been wanting to get back to creating more of these types of educational videos around career and leadership advice. And I want to start with this one today. So what we're going to be looking at in this video are 5 crucial strategies that you should be focusing on if you want to succeed in today's workforce. What are those 5 crucial strategies? Well, you're just going to have to watch the rest of the video to find out. And if you like this type of content, please remember to hit that subscribe button to follow the channel when more of these types of videos are created. Okay, so I've been spending a bit of time putting together some of my favorite pieces of advice that I've collected from a lot of the CEOs that I've interviewed and worked with over the years, from a lot of the research that I've done in some of the books that I've written, and data that I've collected. So I jotted down here what I consider to be 5 of the most important strategies that you should be implementing if you want to succeed in today's workforce. The first one is to focus on the leader fit, not the culture fit. What do I mean by that? Oftentimes when we look for a job, we get very enamored with the company that we want to work for. I was very obsessed with just trying to focus on working for a cool brand like a Pepsi, like a Apple, like a Microsoft. That's really the only thing that I was thinking of. And it turns out that that's actually a big mistake. So instead of focusing on the brand, instead of even focusing on the culture, what I want you to do is focus on the actual leader that you are going to be working with. Why the leader? Because the leader is going to be the one that will be teaching you, coaching you, guiding you, mentoring you. That's not going to happen because of the brand. And in fact, it's even worth taking a salary cut knowing that you're going to be working for a leader who is going to give you the tools and the insights that you need to help propel you over long-term success. So don't focus so much on the money. Don't focus so much on the brand or the culture. Pay specific attention to who you're actually going to be working with, what they're going to be teaching you, if they're going to be coaching and mentoring you. That is going to be far more relevant and help you in your success than those other things. One of the stories that I wanted to share is from Jim Barr. He's the CEO of the fitness company Nautilus. I actually just interviewed him on my podcast fairly recently, and he actually told me that he turned down a CEO role so that he could take a job working for a leader that he has spent some time working with in the past, Ravi Saligram. And Ravi is the former CEO of Newell. He actually just stepped down fairly recently, and they're the parent company behind brands like Sharpie, Coleman, Rubbermaid, and others. And so what happened is Jim was told that he can have the CEO role, and then Ravi came to him and said, hey, before you take that role, I have something that I want to pitch you first, and I don't think you should take that CEO role. Why don't you come with me and help me transform this other company?
I ended up with a CEO offer, and he did my reference call, and then he calls me up a little bit later and said, but I got this other thing to think about. And I'm like, what? He persuaded me to defer my first CEO gig until later and join him there. And I really, really enjoyed that experience as well.
And that's exactly what he did. So in that case, Jim wasn't focused on the company. He wasn't focused on the opportunity or the money, because let's be honest, he could have got paid a lot more as the CEO of a different company than he could have working for this other brand. So instead, he focused on the leader. So that's the first piece of advice that I have for you. Number 2 is do 10% more than what is asked. This piece of advice came from Mark Randolph. He is the first CEO of Netflix. I've interviewed him on my podcast as well. And what he told me is that during the course of his career, one of the ways that he became successful is he always did 10% more than what was asked of him. This, I think, is especially relevant in today's workforce because, quite honestly, it feels like we should be doing 10% more than what is asked of us, but the reality is that we're doing 20% less than what is expected. It feels like a lot of people out there, they want more, but they want to do less to get that more. That's not the best approach that you should be taking. And as organizations, if they ever have to go through layoffs or they have tough economic times, guess who's going to be the first type of employee that they let go? They're going to let go of those employees who do 20% less, but who want 10% more. You should be the opposite. You should be the employee who's willing to do 10% more. Do 10% more than what is asked and expected of you. And I think that will be a huge, huge boost for how you can succeed in today's workforce, especially because I think the work ethic that we once had is starting to die. And hopefully it will come back, but especially when we see that work ethic isn't quite where it used to be, if you can be that person who stands out and is willing to do 10% more, then I think you are going to succeed. To give you a little bit of analogy, if you've ever gone to one of those fancy restaurants, or even some just casual mid-range restaurants, you always love when they bring you something free, right? They bring you that bread on the table. You don't pay for it, but it's just kind of that little extra thing there. It's a little bit more. If you ever go to one of those fancy high-end restaurants where they have prefix menus, they might say it's a 7-course meal or a 10-course meal, but really it's like a 15 or 20-course meal because they bring you a lot of free things in between. And so it's that little bit of extra, that boost, the bread on the table that makes a lot of difference in the eyes of your peers and in the eyes of your leaders. So think about it from that perspective. How can you add that little bit of extra bread on the table in the work that you are doing on a regular basis? So a couple examples of this. Maybe you deliver things early. Maybe if you have a client deliverable, they're expecting something, do a little bit more. Maybe sometimes you are the first one in the office. Maybe sometimes you are the last one to leave. Whatever that 10% is, make sure that you do 10% more than what is asked. The next one, leading with vulnerability. That is the subject of my brand new book that just came out. I think this is going to be a huge thing for you to do. Leading with vulnerability is not the same thing as being vulnerable at work. I think being vulnerable at work can actually hurt you far more than it can help you. Vulnerability is this concept of basically exposing the gaps that you might have. And so this could be gaps in knowledge, this could be gaps in competence. Maybe you're talking about feelings or emotions that are kind of exposing an emotional gap for you. Now, inside of your personal life, that's more relevant, right? If you're talking about this with your spouse, your significant other, and you're exposing and talking about those gaps, trying to get support, that makes sense. Inside of a company, you have a different dynamic. You have a hierarchy, you have a boss, you have employees, you have projects and deadlines, you have the issue of money, right? You're being paid, you have a team dynamic. It is not the same. So I don't advocate for you to just expose the gaps inside of your organization that you have. Instead, you can expose the gaps and also demonstrate what you are trying to do to actually close those gaps. So very simple example that I see happen all the time inside of organizations. A leader gives a project for somebody to do, and at some point a mistake is made or something doesn't get done the right way. The employee then goes back to the leader and says, I am so sorry. I messed this up. I made a mistake. I feel terrible. I'm sorry about that. That's being vulnerable. That's exposing the gap. Instead, what I want you to do is not just expose the gap, but demonstrate what you're trying to do to close it. So same scenario. I'm so sorry I made that mistake. I know how important this project was, but here's what I learned from my mistake. And here's 3 things that I'm going to do going forward to make sure that mistake never happens again. Now, in the eyes of your peers, in the eyes of your leaders, what you've done there is not just expose the gap, but talking about what you're doing to close the gap. So other people have a different perception of who you are as an employee and as a potential leader. Don't be the person who just walks around your company exposing gaps. Talk about what you are doing to close those gaps. That's what leading with vulnerability is. Whenever there's vulnerability, see if you can add leadership. Leadership is about competence, being good at your job. Vulnerability is about connecting with other people. You need both of those things: leadership and vulnerability, competence and connection. The next one I have on my list here is think like an owner and not like an implementer. This is, I think, a very, very powerful piece of advice. It came from Kate Johnson. She's now the CEO of a company called Lumen Technologies. And I asked her, when you are leading a team, because she used to be the president of Microsoft in North America, now she's leading a team of thousands of employees at Lumen Technologies. And when we spoke, I asked her, what is the big factor that you see that separates people who are able to grow and excel in their careers versus those who tend to get stuck in maybe mid-level roles who are not able to branch out or move further, right? They've kind of plateaued in their careers. What separates those who break the plateau versus those who are stuck in that plateau? And what she told me is that those who are able to break the plateau think of themselves more like owners, and those who stay in the plateau are those who think of themselves like implementers. What's an implementer? what's an owner? An implementer is somebody who takes somebody else's vision and somebody else's ideas and implements them. And then when something goes wrong, they say, well, it wasn't my idea. So-and-so gave it to me. That's their problem. And so what happens is you do the work, but you shield yourself from any kind of accountability and responsibility and ownership. And so that's what implementers do. Now, if you want to grow and excel in your career, what you need to do is think more like an owner. An owner is somebody who comes up with the ideas, who devises the solution, who takes ownership of the work that they are doing. Again, whether that is credit or whether that is when you make a mistake, saying that was my idea, I acknowledge it, I take responsibility for whatever was done. So own something from start to finish. If you can think of yourself like an owner, again, your leaders and your peers are going to look at you and they're going to say, wow, this person is an owner. I know that we can count on them to do what needs to get done because they are comfortable overseeing it and owning it. They're not scared from that accountability and from that responsibility. The next piece of advice I have for you is be careful who you take advice from. I made this mistake early in my career. So my quick story is I had bad jobs working for other people around 15 years ago. And so I quit my last corporate job 15 years ago. And I told everybody that I wanted to go build something on my own, that I wanted to create my own business. I wanted to do my own consulting or, whatever it was at the time. And everybody around me told me I was crazy. I lived in Los Angeles at the time and I wanted to move to the Bay Area, because I went to school at the University of California, Santa Cruz, which is pretty close by to the Bay Area. So I was telling my friends, my family members, I'm going to quit. I want to do something different. I'm going to move to the Bay Area and I'm going to try to build something on my own. I don't exactly know what that's going to be yet, but I'm going to explore and play around with some ideas. And my friends and my family members basically said, what are you, crazy? You need to have at least a $60,000 annual salary to live in the Bay Area. And at that time, I didn't even have a job. They said, you don't know what you're doing. It's an expensive place to live. You don't have any experience with this. This is going to fail. And I, for a while, was listening to all of their advice. I never pulled the trigger. I never made that move. Now, long story short, eventually I did move to the Bay Area. I did start doing something on my own, which again, led to me where I am now, creating this video for you, speaking at companies and conferences around the world and writing books and creating content. But the thing that I want to get at is when you take advice from people, the problem that I had is I was taking advice from people who were not doing what I wanted to do. Everybody who I was taking advice from had corporate full-time jobs. So why am I listening to them when they have never built or created anything from scratch the way that I want to? For you, when you're taking advice, whether it's from a leader or from a peer inside of your organization, remember to take advice from other people who have achieved what you want to achieve. If you want to be a leader inside of your organization, take advice from other leaders inside of your company who achieved what you want to achieve. But if you're getting advice from peers, from family members, from friends who have not achieved what you want to achieve, then why would you want to take advice from them, right? You want people who are guiding you, who have been there and who have done that. Otherwise, you could take advice from any random person off the street. Everyone has an opinion. You don't need an opinion, you need guidance. And the way that you can get that guidance is by asking people who have done what you want to do, who have become who you want to become. So that's the last piece of advice I have for you. Be careful who you take advice from. So let's quickly recap these things, the 5 pieces of advice that I think will really help you succeed in today's workforce. We have number 1, focus on the leader fit, not the culture or the brand fit. Number 2, do 10% more than what is asked of you. Number 3, lead with vulnerability. Number 4, think like an owner, not an implementer. And number 5, be careful who you take advice from. I hope this video has added value to you. It will help make you more successful in your career and in your leadership journey. If you want more videos just like this, remember to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you back here on this channel with more content very soon.